What makes the web work?
Information and academics.
Passion.
I think it's information.
Electricity.
I think the web works on trust.
Developers.
Connected humans.
We do.
The people.
It's the people.
Totally people.
People.
Make the web work.
Hello and welcome to Web Sessions. My name is Steve Persh of Pantheon. I'm here at Evolve Digital in Manhattan, sitting with Suzanne Dergacheva, co-founder of Evolving Web. Suzanne, my first question for you is, what makes the web work?
Such a good question. I think for me, it's always been from my first, trying out the internet when I was in grade 5. It must have been all about connection. Like you have people who are always looking for the next way to communicate with each other because they want to connect either with their family, new communities they're getting involved in, and now any kind of connection you want to make, almost that first touch point is always through the web. So what makes the web work is that desire for people to want to connect, and then that's motivating everything else, the content, the user behavior. I think about it from a UX and content strategy perspective, so I always think of like what users are motivating.
Yeah, and that motivation for connection is so strong, and somehow also in this 30-plus year history of the internet, there's also an increasing feeling of isolation. I don't know how to square those two things. We have made so much incredible technology from the drive to connect with one another, and the end result is so many more people are feeling isolated. I don't know what to make of that.
I understand that conundrum exactly. I was thinking this in my mind when you asked the question. Connections, it seems like it's painting such a rosy picture, right? We have all these dreams of like what the internet could be and how it connects people and brings communities together. And then we think of how companies get involved and they think, well, how can we take advantage of that desire? And so, of course, the connections get interfered with, and people's motivations, they get online and then they get distracted, they get cut off from communities. There's.
Yeah. So how does Evolving Web approach any given project, website or otherwise, to ensure that those bad side effects or perhaps intentional distractions don't happen? How do you make sure that when you're building a website that exists presumably to bring people to that website for some specific purpose, how do you make sure it works well?
Yeah, exactly. Great question. So I think when we think about our design philosophy and we step back and we try to answer that question for ourselves and for our clients, we're always talking about human-centered design. So when we start a new project, we're figuring out what should this website do, even like what is its purpose. We're looking at what users need, like what organizations need, what users need, and what is bringing them together, and what's that intersection between what your objectives are as an organization and creating a website and what the user needs when they're coming to you. And then being authentic about the brand and not pretending to be something you're not. Those kind of basic design principles, I think, go a long way to overcoming that.
Sure. How do you take that human-centered approach in an era where you can come to a conference like this and hear plenty of presentations about how to tailor a website for the robots, how to make websites friendlier to LLMs? I don't think these goals have to be mutually exclusive, but they are two different points of focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that when people are coming up with a strategy that involves AI, that involves optimizing for generative AI, that it's actually also thinking about the user and how they're using those technologies. So when we do something like user journey mapping and we're thinking through how a user is interacting with a website for the first time. We think about, are they using search? Are they getting a link from a newsletter? Or are they doing ChatGPT and they're finding a link that way? So we're trying to think through that. And so I hope that in optimizing for LLMs, we're actually trying to also improve the user experience. But it's also new. It's hard to answer very specifically.
Sure. I know at many of these Evolve Digital events that you've been putting on for 2 or 3 years now, there have been a lot of presentations about AI. I'm curious if there are any presentations that have really stuck with you or really changed the way you approach your day-to-day work.
There's definitely a lot that have stuck with me. I feel like there's seeing examples of how people are actually using AI, not to just simply generate content, but more to do work that they weren't doing well enough before.
Sure.
These are the things that inspire me the most. An example, a webinar that we gave at Evolving Web, one of my colleagues, about AI-assisted translation workflows. This is a great example of like a lot of websites now would like to be fully multilingual, and they're not. They have huge holes in their content in certain languages, or they're just missing languages that they would like to offer. And so by having something like AI in the mix to draft content that then gets reviewed, it's adding a whole service and opening up the content to whole new audiences that weren't there before. So those kind of things where we're not just using AI to replace or speed up the work we were doing before, but rather to actually augment and provide new services. This is the best.
And how do you think about approaching a situation like that, which to me sounds like something like a website or a team like probably already has, before LLMs had the need to be translated and may have been struggling to translate. That to me seems like a situation where AI can be helpful. However, I do not translate my personal website. I do not speak foreign languages. I imagine if I asked AI to help me, it could, but I would have no way of evaluating whether or not it did a good job. Are you seeing more success with AI projects that are augmenting or assisting something that the team of humans was already doing to some degree?
Absolutely, yeah. Like another example would be content strategy. A lot of times there's no full-time person who can do content strategy, but there's somebody whose job it is to do the content or to take ownership of content. And if strategy can be a bigger part of their job, and things like manually going through content and finding the problems can be sped up with AI, I think that's a huge, a huge win, because they're automating the part that's time consuming, and then they're able to spend more time on something strategic.
If I can shift the conversation for a moment, I recall going to conferences like this a decade or so ago, and I started to hear the term content strategy over and over again. And I was so confused because I had been building Drupal sites for many years at that point, and I didn't have a clear picture in my head of what does this phrase content strategy mean, because the people who are using it seem to sometimes mean what I have just been doing, which is like making content types, but they also seem to mean something else, and I don't know what. How would you have explained content strategy to the very confused Steve of 10 or 15 years ago?
I think that really hits on it. Content strategy is something that a lot of people already did. I also started doing content strategy 18 years ago when I was building websites, but I never would have called it that. I would have called it building a website. So there's lots of other examples of that too, where people do UX work. A front-end developer will fill in the gaps and make decisions about UX. Somebody putting together a content type or just deciding what field on a content type should be required, they're doing content strategy, but maybe they're not doing it so intentionally. And so I think when we call somebody a content strategist, or we're saying you're doing content strategy, it's having that goal of trying to match the content with the actual audiences and users of the site and the needs, and specifically building the CMS to support that, or actually writing the content in a way that supports that. So it covers a lot of different disciplines because it impacts the information architecture. It then influences decisions about site building. Also, of course, user experience, where you place blocks on a page, the flow of content, and then actually the writing itself. And so there's not that many people who call themselves content strategists. I think it's more like an activity that's part of often other roles.
Sure. For any given project, how does Evolving Web approach the question of which separate disciplines are needed? Because I can imagine any given web team, any given web project saying we have a distinct or multiple distinct back-end developer, front-end developer, designer, UX strategist, content strategist, accessibility expert, project manager, product owner. You can very quickly get up to 12 people and beyond, or 12 distinct roles and
Absolutely.
beyond. At the same time, there's a zeitgeist out here of no, you just need one person who knows what a good website is and maybe Claude Code or whatever, and you're good.
Yeah, so we have a strategy team at Evolving Web, and so we try for every project, even if it's a really technically driven project that doesn't list strategy as one of the services, we still have a strategist assigned. And they're the ones, looking for those opportunities where we can do better in terms of what's the purpose of this site, then carrying through to content, carrying through to UX. And they're involved from day one, but they also keep that eye on the project and work with the project manager to see are we doing everything we can to achieve the goals. And sometimes a challenge is that we're building a website and we're working with a team that includes the folks who are writing the content. Of course, if we're working with a big university, they often have a lot of capacity and skills in writing their own content, and they have that knowledge of their brand, and it's great that they take that ownership. So then we have to make sure that we're collaborating with them. Sometimes it involves training. So it depends for every project what the skills are, who's involved, what services we give, but it's all directed by that strategist who has an eye for what's going to make it successful.
Yeah, keeping the focus on what is success. I'm just about to say a tautology. Keeping your eye on success is the key to success. So I suppose we'll end on that obvious statement. And can I get a high five before we go? All right.
Steve.
Thanks. All right, Suzanne Dergacheva, thanks so much for joining us here at Web Sessions. Have a great conference, everybody, and I'll see you on the internet.